I was a personal trainer for many years before I even decided to go into being a studio owner, and there was always a love of fitness for me. So and then I found this yoga that just transformed my life, and I just had a lot of conversations with people as I realized where these studios were located. They were never located in areas where the majority of the people look like me, and I thought that for sure there was an opportunity for us to open in a location that is very diverse and very much where I wouldn't be the only one, and I would be in a sense serving my community. And so that's actually what drove me to open the first studio in the place that I did. Is a place called Riverdale Park, and literally it's 30% white, 30% Latino, and 30% Black. And I was like, wow, like this is like perfect. And so when I did that, I was like, wow. And I saw how many people started coming just because of who I was. It was an invitation in a sense to say, please come. I just knew that there was a need in the community that I came from, in the community that I would drive by every day. And I decided that with that need, I can actually really help transform lives, and that's what my whole career has been about, is really about transforming lives. But this allowed me to be able to do it in a way that's very much more tangible. One of the things that I realized is that as I grew, more and more of our students then became instructors. Some of them actually became staff of my organization. It was a natural progression, and honestly, in all the studios that we opened, with the exception of one, and NT, don't say anything, with the exception of one, has been intentionally focused on diverse communities, because we knew, for example, that we didn't want to just open up in an area that was, predominantly white, because that wasn't going to be that wasn't our mission. We wanted to bring it to traditionally underserved communities, where not in the sense of like poor communities per se, but in the sense of communities that didn't actually have that service. So there are a lot of services, even from my house, that I have to travel, 45 minutes to an hour to get, and most of my, community has to do that. And so I decided to be intentional about how I pack my services in terms of bringing the right services to my organization, and also how I decided where I would go. I turned down an opportunity recently that was, the owner was going to build me out completely. I was going to have a turnkey studio, but then I looked at the demographics and I was like, no, that's not what I want to do. It doesn't really represent who we are as an organization, and that's how I've been intentional about my growth in a sense. But staffing itself, as I said, because our community was already diverse, and we already had diverse teachers, a lot of the students now can actually see themselves in the room. I got an email maybe a few months ago from a woman who has lost maybe over 100 pounds in the last year and a half, just doing what she needed to do, being in the room, eating right. And then we had recently a teacher who was, a plus size teacher. And when she saw that woman in the room and teaching that class, she was like, oh my gosh, Kendra, I feel like I can be that one day, and so that has been, part of our ethos as a company, where we are like, anybody and anybody could be up on that stage. Anybody and anybody could be an inspiration to, the members that come in, the students that come to take class. And we try to write that into our design.
I think that's really powerful. So the intention behind it, and like a very deliberate effort to make to diversify your community. But and NT, you're welcome. I'll direct this to you too. I think it's really powerful, the intention behind it. But what about, and you also chose a location that was intentionally diverse rather than just like an all white area. But what about already existing owners that are already in a particular area? Do you, either of you have any other advice for attracting a more diverse clientele in an already existing
Yeah.
enterprise space neighborhood?
I do. I do. I think for me, the main thing is through partnership. I am very much against, as you know, Leanne, tokenization of anybody in in this space. But I think that some of this could be done simply through partnership. And the moment that like we've had, white facilitators, Latino facilitators, Black facilitators come in and do workshops in our studio. These are just simple ways that you can attract people of different backgrounds that are not currently in your studio just by who you partner, just by who you decide to bring into your studio as the quote unquote expert in a particular thing. All of us are dealing with people who are trying to lose weight, people who are, trying to eat better. Find a Black juice bar, find, a Black owned juice bar, find, a Black nutritionist to come in and talk. I think once you create those partnerships, then it's easier for you to be a little bit more authentic in getting that diverse crowd of people to come and even venture into your space.
That's great.
So I think that a few things that Kendra said are actually really powerful, and I think that it's something that is worth taking note. And we've heard this in the rest of corporate America as well, but diversity is actually a business opportunity, right? And so I think of what Kendra has done. I was really impressed when I first heard of what she'd done, what her sort of model is. Now she talks about it as her mission, right? But if you think about Magic Johnson, and his partnership with Starbucks and putting Starbucks into diverse communities, or partnering, I think it was with AMC movie theaters and putting the movie theater up in Harlem, et cetera, and making a tremendous amount of money. There are underserved parts of the country, from a people and a population perspective, that really are not being invited into, boutique fitness. Now, part of that is where the different businesses may be located, but part of that is also, and we get into some specific things here, the imagery that we use. So when I look at a lot of the imagery that we see, it's always like a certain body type, a certain color, et cetera. This is one of the things that, Julie and I highlighted in our letter, the business case for diversity, right? If you can make your imagery so that it has different shapes and different colors, then you can start to attract people in. And in addition to that, you now have the ability. Kendra talked about having a diverse staff. Well, I mean, it's like it magically happened, right? But there's actually the ability to go to places like Talent Hack. Now, if you're in a location or a place where you might not have access to as many diverse people, we write about this in the business case for diversity, but you can go to Talent Hack and look up instructors. We're in a live stream world now. You could reach out to instructors that are in the major metropolitan areas and do a deal with them where they bring some of their community or some of the people who follow them in those areas in. And so that way you diversify your staff, diversify your offering, and actually expand your business and your footprint. That's how you can get more national and more global. So I think there are very specific things that can be done to help, where diversity can actually be really, really good for you.
How can a white instructor that works mostly in a white studio in a white community get a more diverse clientele to feel welcome, or to engage with more, bring in a more diverse clientele? I'll broaden her question to that a little bit. She's asking for action steps.
You might work in a primarily white studio with white ownership, white members, but look at the places around you. There may be many businesses around you that employ Black people, by the way. A lot of this stuff I believe can really be done through partnership and with a little bit of intention. So look at the businesses around you. Maybe they, go to their HR departments. Maybe they have, a focus on health and well-being, or, wellness advisor that really is looking at the health of their employees. Look at those businesses around you, and really, I really do encourage everybody to look at your friend circle. This is not just about just going out there and finding people. Look at who is in your current circle. I think I've had the very fortunate experience of always being around a diverse group of people anyway, so it was a natural thing for me. But look at your friend circle again. feel free to step outside of your comfort zone, go across town and take class with another, another instructor in a predominantly white community, and partner. You can do events that are outdoor, you know what I mean? You can do events that really have nothing to do with what you do in the classroom, but maybe of mutual interest, that nutrition workshop, that everyone wants to have, or, a posture workshop, or whatever. But, think of how you can partner, and a lot of it could just mean you just getting out of your studio and going to take classes elsewhere and reaching out to, the businesses around you. I would start there first. It doesn't have to be, again, major things, but again, areas where you can potentially partner, and not just going in there saying, I want to find more diverse clients. No, there should be some intention behind it. And I would just say, get out of that studio and go across town.
It's a tricky one, right? So here's what I think the concern is, and what you don't want to feel, or don't don't want to do. You don't want to be weird, like, hey, hey, conversation with someone that's just like, okay, why did you come up to me? Like, that would be one of those. And I think that people get afraid of that sort of thing happening. I think this is, well, first of all, let's say a couple of things up front. There are many minorities who are used to be the only minorities in the room. And then there are others who are sort of coming in, and it's like, okay, this is really interesting and really different for me. Um, so you have to sort of go back and forth between those two things. I think that paying attention to a person the same way that you would any other person, right? And maybe a little bit more so, just in terms of saying, hey, welcome, or whatever it happens to be. I think that is perfectly legitimate. If you take sort of a minority who's used to being the only person in the room, if you go much further than that, then it just feels weird, right? It's like, okay, why am I getting treated differently? But the flip side is that I think that the way that I've always approached it is, I'm just straight up honest. I will be like, hey, um, if it is within the context of, how would I say? At first, I would make sure that it's not me that's nervous about it, because it could just be a reflection of me, why I feel like I have to say something. But if I really feel like, wow, they looked uncomfortable or something like that, then I'd go up and I'd be like, hey, um, just want to make sure that you had a great time. Is there any feedback? Any experience? Is there any feedback that you have? Don't make it about race. Just make it about them as a new client, or someone with a potentially different experience. And I think that you'll get the feedback, and you'll get the interest in the conversation, just by acting as a human being. If we are sort of consciously attempting to make that difference, then one of the best recommendations is a referral. I would actually ask existing instructors of yours, or teachers of yours, do they have, friends who might be a minority, or represent different groups, or whatever, and sort of put that front and center. Because the one thing that I know, most people out there are not sitting there saying, I don't want to be diverse. Most people are just living their lives. They're just going day by day, and sort of saying, I need to move this forward, and I need to figure this out, right? So it actually, if it's going to be something that is out of the normal course of things for you, then you actually have to make a conscious effort, to do it. And so consciously ask the question, and keep asking that question. I think that's one thing that I would say. You just have to realize it's sort of like hearing someone say something strange. If you're not in the practice of, saying, that was really strange, don't say that again, and you just keep normally going by, you have to actually stop yourself and say, that was a strange thing. So you have to practice and actually just ask the question.
Great.
Yeah, I would say
Kendra,
that
anything to add there?
to lead, Yes, I would say to Lisa that, look at where you're advertising, in addition to asking, as NT said, asking your current instructors, there are a lot of online groups now that are, very specific to Black and Brown, people in this space, in the wellness space, in the boutique fitness space. And so, and many of these groups are public. And so I would say, start looking around in those groups, who's active in those groups. And some of the leaders of those groups will be very willing to share if you had a, job description, or you had, a call for applications, or, teachers, and, they would be willing to share that. So I would encourage you to look for those groups, Black Yoga Teachers Alliance, there's many like that I think would be helpful, and again, would welcome the partnership.
And I want
Great.
to
Thanks,
again go
Kendra.
back and tie this to Charlie enough. So I want to go back and I want to tie this because it sounds like a lot of extra effort, right? And I want to make sure that we're tying it back. It's why it's like Julian and I called our sort of paper, our letter, the business case for diversity. Right now, at this point in time, especially with Corona, people are operating at 20, 40, 50, 60% of their normal capacity. You need new clients, right? Getting different instructors, for example, that can bring in different audiences helps you bring in new clients. So, I want to be cognizant of the fact that we're living in a Corona world and most of us are sort of upside down. And, I give all credit to all the folks who are on the line because they care and care about this, even though they might not know whether or not they'll be around 3 months from now, 6 months from now. I think that that's incredible. But I also want to say that part of doing this is can also help your business as well and make it stronger and broader. The first thing that you have to do is you have to be very interested in their feedback, right? If they are the first, or if they are one of the few, or whatever, then you can't just. It's sort of like taking someone and dropping them in and being like, okay, and now you go on doing doing the same thing that you've always been doing. You introduced a different sort of in there. And so I would have an open conversation that says, hey, please give me the feedback, of what you're seeing and how you're experiencing this, and if there are ways in which we can make this more inclusive or make this a more comfortable environment. What I always think about, it's always interesting to me. When I was at Cornell, for example, I saw this at Cornell quite a bit. Many of the African American students came from the inner city, right? Now, Cornell is like what, 400 acres of like grassland or whatever, and also like it's a different environment. It's a different environment from the support structure that exists inside the classroom in the inner city, all the way through to just the environment itself, and that can sometimes just be difficult for folks, right? And so being open to hearing, how are you going through this? What are you experiencing? We're very interested in learning and growing and making this place more than it's been before is, I think, a big part of it.
Yeah, I think for me, I agree with what you said. For me, one of the things that we've been implementing in our just course of business is, I have allowed all of my teachers to come up with, things that they would like to offer to the community. And when they come to me with an idea, I also ask them, well, what's the business case? And then how is this mutually beneficial? And then I let them develop the idea, and then I also invest in their idea. So I pay for photo shoots. I pay for the videographer to film, a quick promo about the new, class format or whatever the case may be. We support them by, really promoting them on social media. So, and through our newsletter, we We highlight them in our newsletter. We do a teacher spotlight or instructor spotlight. So there are many different ways where we've been able to elevate our teachers in our studio community so that everyone kind of gets to know them. We humanize them a little bit. It's been really, really good. And I want to just give a flip comment in a way. My being a Black owner doesn't mean that I don't have to deal with diverse issues, right? Like, my staff is heavily Black, and that's because we have attracted them. So I've been intentional about making sure that I get white teachers, and that's not always easy. But what I do, I go and take classes in other studios. Those teachers that I do like, I reach out to them. I have friends who have taken classes at studios, and if they give me a recommendation, I reach out to those teachers as well. So that's been part of how we've been able to create and maintain the diversity of our teaching staff as well as our student body. Now we're in the space of Black Lives Matter, and I would just recommend that just don't go ahead and slap a Black Lives Matter sticker on your window. I mean, that to me would be a little bit tokenization. But the example that I gave, I had reached out to this really well-known workshop facilitator in Bikram yoga. And when I first opened up, I reached out to her and I said, hey, I'm a new studio owner. I've followed you for many, many years. I would love for you to come to my studio. And she literally ignored my message. She never responded. When I took over the Boston location in 2018, all of a sudden, within 2 weeks, I guess the word got out that it's now a Black studio. And mind you, this is a 98% white in terms of community of the members. And I got an email. She actually responded to the same message that I sent her literally 6 years ago. And I was like, that to me felt inauthentic, right? It was now that I apparently have multiple locations and you see a business opportunity, then you reach out to me. So this is what I'm talking about. I think, all of us kind of have people in our network that know people. And I think that some of this is really about reaching out to your existing network and your members too, inviting them. So part of our business model has always been, we give our members, those who are paying auto debit members, 2 buddy passes a month. And we really encourage them to keep inviting people into the studio, and especially new people who have never tried it before. So that is the goal of the buddy passes. So we've been able to get a lot of people just coming in, organically, and so we rely a lot on our members to do that. So if you have people in your community already, use them as a resource. I wouldn't necessarily. I think it's harder to just start looking online for Black teachers. I mean, it doesn't really work like that. There's a connection that needs to be made. So many of the people that I've reached out to already knew somebody in this space. I was looking recently for bar teachers. So I reached out to a friend and she said, oh, this person and this person gave me like 3 different recommendations. This is what I'm saying. So talk to the people who are already in your community, in your circle, who may have that broader network and who are willing to help you access those diverse networks. Again, think partnership. If you know of other, minority or Black owned or, owned studios, or not even just Black owned, just people of color who are owning other complementary in businesses. Again, I just mentioned a juice bar because that you'll find a lot of those, maybe even another gym, especially for those of us who are in the yoga space who are being forced a little bit to diversify our class offerings, reach out to them and see if they're willing to share some of their instructors as well. I think it's, to me, the diversity has to be it has to be intentional in a way. There needs to be a view to that and a desire to have it. But I think to make it authentic, that you really have to look in your inner circle and see who might be able to facilitate access for you.
I love
Can I
that.
jump in and
Just
say
thinking,
something?
please, yeah.
Sorry, because of the delay, I can't exactly hear like your reaction and that reaction, so I apologize. I think one of the things that I'd wanted to bring up in addition to what Kendra was saying, and this is more like what Kendra and I have been talking about has been advice, to owners on how they can be more diverse or welcome inclusion, et cetera. But one of the things that I wanted to offer is how the conversations that you have inside your staff, right? And with whether it's instructors who are minority instructors who are part of your staff, or just even understanding what's happening out in the world, right now. And how when Kendra says that, wow, after I have my 5th studio open, now you reach out to me. I feel like some could sit there and say, well, maybe it's just because that's the period in time that they decided to reach out to you, and not that might have had something to do with race at the beginning. So there is a level of sensitivity that we have sort of going through life, sort of being Black. And I wanted to address that for a second, and I'm going to address it in an interesting way. So I have a friend of mine who is a very well-known, very large venture capitalist, and he was asking me at one point in time, I was sitting down, and my first company, I had raised $25 million for that company. And so we're sitting down, we're having lunch, and he asked me, did you ever have any difficulty raising money for your company in Silicon Valley as a Nigerian? And I was just like, I had never really thought about it. I was like, why would I? And his answer was, yeah, there's actually a little bit of skepticism about Nigerians in Silicon Valley. And I'm like, I would never have known that. And we all practice, whether it's conscious or unconscious, pattern recognition, right? And so if you go to Silicon Valley has a woman problem, and it has a woman problem partially because they don't see a lot of women founders. Like they see the hoodie, the guy from Harvard that dropped out that wears Birkenstocks, and so they're like, okay, we got that guy. They're like, okay, they see the immigrant from India, who starts like, okay, we got that guy. They do not see many women, and they don't see many Black people. And so when we think about that and we take a step back and we say, okay, let's look around our industry. What assumptions are we making? When we deal with someone else, when we have an interaction, when we look at the number of trainers and instructors who are minority, but we see the gap in them getting into management positions, right? Is there something that we're sort of unconsciously not thinking about? Like if there's a disparity, is this person really saying that they're not interested in becoming a manager, or are you just not used to seeing that? And so one of the things that I encourage us to do as we sort of have this conversation, everyone who's on the line, is think about our unconscious biases. And as we go and we think about this stuff and say, okay, if I'm seeing a difference, if I'm seeing a discrepancy, what am I not thinking about or opening my eyes to, when I in my own decisions?
I think the music that is played in the classes, the the ability to make sure that you're also censoring. Like, I don't want to go into a studio where I'm hearing the N-word repeatedly said in the music. That's just not my thing. So there's a sensibility to it. And I do think that it also requires you to have, again, that diverse staff will help you kind of break through some of the noise and be able to say, well, that makes sense, that doesn't make sense. I would do that, I wouldn't do that. And how do you really, I think NT mentioned it, really get the feedback and really listen to the people who are in your community and really understand, like, so, whereas, millennial culture is all of the profanity and the N-word and the whatever, a lot of us people who have really had to navigate this space, it's something that we are very sensitive to. So watch what you're doing in the studio, watch again who's inputting into kind of your way of doing business, and whether or not that allows for multiple voices to be heard. And again, as I said, it's not just about having, a certain number of Black people, certain number of brown people, or whatever. It's really looking across your team and really listening to everybody's voices and making sure that you can amplify everyone's voice at some point, as you're trying to navigate this space. The business case for diversity, I think that is the only thing that has helped us really stay afloat at this time. And so and I'm loving it, because I feel like, my business model really spoke to that. And it really, right now, as people started dropping their memberships, we're starting to see where we're finding the major drop off. And for the most part, it's really just people who have, lost their jobs and stuff like that. And we can start to even look deeper into the data of who is dropping off. And then you might need to find ways to support people to come into the studio. So we have a very robust karma yogi program where people can volunteer their time and be a part of the studio and contribute in that way. We also have our buddy passes, when we have other ways that we can at least get people to explore the environment in the beginning. Our introductory rate is only $49, which is very affordable for most people. And so we're like, just come and try it out. So I would say that sometimes you might need to do an audit of everything that you're doing across the board to see, is it exclusionary at any point? And if it is, maybe, and some of us have to, because we have high rents, but how can you make it such that other people can find a place in your space?